Good afternoon, everyone. This is Queenie Clem with Queenie's Book Talk and Reviews, and I am your literary ambassador. And today I have TaRessa Stovall on my channel today. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much, Queenie, my favorite literary ambassador, and hello to everybody.
Thank you, thank you. Now tell us a little about yourself.
Well, let's see. What is there to know about me? I'm a baby boomer. I was born in Seattle, Washington, and I write about different things. I do write quite a bit about identity. I'm mixed race, so I write a lot about that. I'm an anti-colorism activist. I write a lot about that. And my memoir about growing up and my whole identity journey against the backdrop of the racial identity dynamics of this country in the US just came out. It's called Swirl Girl, Coming of Race in the USA. And I'll share that as well as some of my earlier books and talk about my writing journey. This memoir was by far the most challenging thing I've ever written. And I've been writing since I was 7 years old. When I was young, I wrote a lot of poetry, some plays, things like that. And then I grew up and decided I wanted to try writing some books. So I've been blessed to be a published author. And what I'm trying to do now is really make sure I leave a writing legacy that can help to make a difference in fighting racism in the world and in bringing us all together as people to make a better world for everyone.
All right, tell us about your books.
About my books?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, well, so I'm going to go back a little bit. 20 years. All right, so 20 years ago, my first big book was published, and this book was kind of interesting. I thought of the idea for the book for a friend of mine. It wasn't an idea for me. She didn't pick it up. I had a literary agent. I was working on something else. The literary agent liked this idea, said, do it, and do it with your husband. My husband, ex-husband as I call him, is a wonderful man named Calvin Stovall, father of our son and daughter. And he was, until he retired recently, a very renowned print journalist. So, it made sense for us to do this. So the title of the book is, I want to make sure you can see it, is A Love Supreme, Real Life Stories of Black Love. It came out in 2000, so it's 20 years old. I guess that makes it a collector's item now.
Yes.
20 years old. It was published by Time Warner. It was our first major book, and my first major book. And it was very revolutionary 20 years ago because the whole idea was to prove to people and to show people that there were healthy, strong, viable Black marriages. So that might sound crazy now, but 20 years ago, it was a big deal. And there really weren't a lot of images, and there weren't a lot of stories, and there weren't a lot of depictions. And so we kind of set out to say, we talked to a lot of happily mostly long married couples, very diverse group, a few famous folks. And I want to share, some of the famous folks were Dr. Janetta Cole, President Emerita of both Spelman and Bennett Colleges for Women, and her then husband. It's 20 years, so some of these people are not still together for various reasons. But Colin Powell and his wife are in it. And I wanted to share a story of Barbara and Earl Graves, because Earl Graves is one of our beloved legends in the Black business world, the founder, publisher of Black Enterprise magazine, who for decades was really the main person, sometimes the only person, really pushing not only Black entrepreneurship, but all kinds of empowering, wonderful things. And he just passed away recently. And so we were blessed to have Barbara and Earl Graves as one of the couples that we profiled. So I just want to share a little bit about that. And each couple's section had a title, and theirs was titled Riches of the Heart. Barbara and Earl G. Graves, Westchester County, New York. This was written 20 years ago. The name and face of Earl G. Graves are icons of Black achievement and ambition. He is publisher and CEO of Black Enterprise magazine, former chairman and CEO of Pepsi Cola of Washington, D.C., the largest minority-controlled Pepsi Cola franchise in the United States, and now chairman, Pepsi Cola Ethic Advisory Board. He is a nationally recognized authority on Black business development and is in the front lines of the struggle to help African Americans plant, harvest, and enjoy the fruits of success. What many people may not realize is that this business titan's greatest asset is not his driving ambition, keen intelligence, charismatic charm, or business savvy, but his loving wife of 39 years, Barbara. And while devoted to his mission of creating wealth for himself and others, he values their family with their 3 sons and a growing brood of grandchildren above all. Unlike many women married to super successful famous men, the lovely and dignified Barbara Graves does not seek recognition or revel in her status. Instead, her husband says, she is more likely to stay off to the side, quietly observing the goings-on. When the time is right, she may offer a pertinent comment or privately share her thoughts with her husband. Earl's decision to court and marry Barbara was, quote, the smartest personal and business move of my life. He wrote in his book, How to Succeed in Business Without Being White, Straight Talk on Making It in America. She has always provided me with a guiding sense of perspective and balance. Her values and principles have kept me on track over the years, and it was Barbara who taught me, for example, what true integrity is. Those lessons began early in their relationship. Earl was a handsome, debonair Army man, attending airborne and ranger school, jumping out of airplanes, and full of himself. In college, he joined Omega Psi Phi fraternity, the infamous Q Dogs, and had an eye for the ladies. Barbara Kidd was a first-grade teacher, picture pretty, innocent, and content with her work and her life. Their best friends were dating. When Earl saw a picture of Barbara at his friend's house and asked to meet her, a blind date was arranged. Barbara wasn't too enthusiastic, but as a favor to her friend, I consented to meet him. She gave the soldier high marks for his first impression. So that's the beginning of their amazing love story.
Yes.
So I wanted to honor him in sharing stories from A Love Supreme that features 20 Black couples. Like I said, some of the couples aren't together anymore, and neither are my husband and I, by the way. But what you realize when you read the stories is the lessons that you learn, the examples that you get, they hold up because, of course, they hold up over time. Love is love, whether it has a short run or a medium run or a long run. And, you know, these are still strong stories. So it was really an honor to do this book, which ended up being featured on Oprah. So that was really cool. So the next book was very different. Donna Hill, one of my favorite authors, reached out, this is in the early, maybe 2003 or 4, reached out to me and said she'd struck a deal with BET at the time, and they wanted to jump on the publishing bandwagon and get in front of what was being, you know, chick lit books were big then, and they wanted to get out in front with urban chick lit. So Donna was an editor, and she got to reach out to some authors, and she reached out to me, and I'd never written anything like this before. I'd never published full-length fiction, just a couple short stories in other people's anthologies. And she convinced me I could do it. And so I did it, and it was really, really fun. So this book, this is a galley, so you can see the stripe at the top. It says not for sale. But this book is called The Hot Spot. I'm trying to get these on camera. A Hot Spot. I was trying to be cute, so I was just going by my first name for a hot minute, you know, trying to be like Oprah and Beyonce. But trio of girlfriends, their adventures, their antics, they end up going to a sexy Caribbean island. And the main character, whose name is Kendra, has a public relations firm, and she's, you know, many years before Olivia Pope, or the real, you know, Olivia Pope, she's kind of a public relations expert and a fixer of people's crises. So in this scene, Carmen has been called in to help a congressman and his wife who've had a crisis. And the crisis is based on something that happened in real life when I lived in Atlanta in the mid-'80s with a famous man, but I'm not going to name him. And so I adapted it for this. But what happened is the prominent famous politician was in a car, long married, many children, was in a car with his mistress. And the wife saw them, followed them to his mother's house. And then he stayed in the car. His mistress got out of the car and beat his wife upside the head with her very high stiletto shoe. This actually happened, but I adapted it for the story. So Kendra's called in to help a fictionalized version, right, of this congressman with a fictionalized version of this story as kind of to do damage control. So we're starting there. So let's see, sorry. And his wife, both his wife and the main character, because it's set in Atlanta, are Spelman graduates, but they don't know each other. The wife is much older, very sophisticated first lady. Okay, so I started to press him for more info, but the stressed look on his wife's face stops me. She is my Spelman sister, after all, and a woman whose perfect world is falling apart before her eyes. There will be time to get the whole story later. Okay, so we're gonna keep the mistress nameless and anonymous, right? The congressman nods. His wife, sitting across from, rather than beside him, closes her eyes and sighs deeply. The congressman turns to his wife. What do you think, dear? She looks coolly intrigued. I'd like to hear more about what Kendra has to say. I'd like to know her strategy. Kendra is speaking. The single most important factor to remember is that the good congressman is a beloved public figure, an icon in Atlanta and in Washington. He's got great poll ratings, top credibility, and an unblemished personal life so far. The public forgives another high-profile man for infidelity every day of the year. As long as the congressman shows remorse, publicly begs Mrs. Barkley for forgiveness, and swears to straighten up and fly right, public sentiment will remain with him. And by the way, we'll need your minister with us as well, and your strongest supporters from the business and political communities. The congressman smiles ruefully. I can see why you come so highly recommended, young lady. Again, he leans towards his wife. What do you think, darling? Mrs. Barkley stands and immediately commands. You can now, we're good? Okay, and The Hot Spot was published in 2005. So after that, I joined forces with 3 writer friends, Tracy Price Thompson, Desiree Cooper, and Elizabeth Atkins. And we wrote a book that is really my favorite book. I know you're not supposed to have favorites, but it's kind of my favorite book. It's an anthology, 4 novellas, which are long short stories or very short novels, about 100 pages-ish, and around a common theme. And the theme we chose was Black women dealing with colorism and hairism with a focus on healing. This book came out in 2008, and the title is Other People's Skin. So that's the title of the book. So my novella is titled My People, My People. And it's about an ad exec, this woman named Carmela. Now, Carmela is African-American, brown-skinned, and working for a Black-owned ad agency. She was successful at a white-owned ad agency, but wanted to work, with her own people. And she's got a really exciting ad campaign going for an African-American woman client who's older, a former supermodel turned cosmetics mogul. And she suggested a very dark-skinned African featured model to be the spokesperson for this and the face for this.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear?
No, I can't. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. This is about colorism in the ad agency and in the larger world. So this older woman whose name is Helena, former supermodel, dark-skinned herself, shuts down the idea of the dark-skinned supermodel being the spokesperson and the face of the brand with this African-American ad agency and with our protagonist, Carmela, who is just devastated and very upset. So she's thinking about this meeting, and she and her boss said, you have to save this account. She's our major client, our anchor client, which she pays for the office and everybody's salaries and everything. So you've got to save this. So this is Carmela speaking. My people, I muttered, searching out faces in the crowd that whizzed around me. Why are we still tripping off of our different shades? Why do we keep weighing ourselves down with this mess? Light skin, dark skin, good hair, bad hair. Every Black person I knew had been touched by this madness, either directly or indirectly. My stick around brown complexion put me squarely in the middle of the color bar, neither light nor dark enough to attract much attention or force me to defend myself against charges of being stuck up or ugly. But I'd watched the sad drama played out in school classrooms as teachers favored lighter-skinned students, heard it in playground taunts and threats, and felt it pulling families apart as one child was called too much of this or not enough of that. My family wasn't hung up on the color thing, but it came into our house through television and magazines. The hunger to see more Black folks in the media led me into advertising. I wanted to create healthier images of Black people, maybe help us to quit fighting among ourselves and accept each other. That fire still burned inside me, but the Helenas of the world seemed determined to stand in my way. For every Amira, that was the dark-skinned supermodel's name, Amira, there were countless light-skinned, longer-haired Black beauties trotted out to represent the safer, more familiar brand of Black allure. So when this tall drink of deep chocolate strode onto the scene, defying the notion that she wasn't qualified to represent, the world took notice. And I rejoiced. I thank God. I took it as a personal victory in the war against African-American self-hatred. I remember the first time I saw a photo of her dominating the Paris runways on covers of magazines. I claimed her audacious beauty for myself and as a personal victory in the war against internalized white supremacy. Her warm elegance gave little dark girls permission to love themselves. Her confidence made believers and skeptics alike take a second look. And the sheer power of her beauty caused everyone to look inward and reassess his or her definition of womanly glory. So that's what the story is about, and how this ad exec, Carmela, tries to address colorism. So that's when, these are kind of themes in my writing throughout the years and things that are important to me. And I always write, Queenie, with the goal of sparking a conversation between people, whether we agree or not, whether we have different perspectives or not. I believe in the power of conversation, so I use my writing to try to make that happen.
What made you want to become an author?
I don't know if I became one. When I was 7 years old, without any forethought, there was a moon. It was September, so what they call the harvest moon. It looks like a big pumpkin. And my mother and my brother and I were outside coming home from somewhere. We were on our porch. And I said, look at the moon. And my mother said, oh, yes, honey, that's called a harvest moon. And I started spitting bars. I was 7 years old. And I just spit out a poem, like just standing there. I'd never written or done anything before. I was a big reader. But, and she said, that's a good poem. Go inside and write it down. So I did. And at that point, I decided I was a writer. And I was a little strange as a child, like most writers are. Because when people would ask me, when adults would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, oh, I am a writer. So I think it just happened. It was the moon's fault.
Okay. How hard is it to establish and maintain a career in writing?
I don't think it's easy. I think it's like anything, Queenie, that is creative. So I'm not like like most writers in various genres, I'm not a full-time writer. It's not the only thing I've done. So I've written everything I've written for the most part while having either a full-time 9-to-5 or consulting. I think it's a calling, whether it's for a single project or many projects. And I've been blessed to do many kinds of writing. My day jobs were in public relations, communications, those kinds of things. So I was always building my writing skills and learning different kinds of writing, including journalism, which came in really handy with my memoir and with the first book. And there are people who manage to do that and do it well, but there aren't a whole lot of people who write full time and make a living.
Okay. How can readers find you and your books?
Most of the books are on Amazon. When I share the memoir, I ventured into independent publishing for my memoir. And so while the other books I shared were traditionally published by large publishing companies, they're all on Amazon. But my memoir is on TaRessaStovall.com. So if I'll put it in the comments, can I do that? But if you see my name, it's just one word, no uppercase, TaRessaStovall.com. And you can read a free sneak peek of the memoir, which I'll share in a moment. And you can purchase the book there. So this independent publishing thing is a whole new world for me. We're not on Amazon yet. We will be once we sell a certain number of copies. But right now, I'm really interested in forming a direct relationship with my readers, long-term relationship for other books to come. And so I'm really excited about this new model of publishing that lets you be more in touch with your readers throughout the whole process.
You say you want to read your memoir? You say you wanted to read from your memoir? Can't hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so this is my latest work. This is my memoir titled Swirl Girl, Coming of Race in the USA, independently published. So this is a whole new world, as I was saying. And this is my identity journey. And it covers 40 years. It starts on the day of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination, Thursday, April 4th, 1968, when I was 13 years old and in the 8th grade in Seattle. And it goes all the way through the historic election of what I like to call I want to share chapter 23. Here's a little picture of me at this age. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
17. Okay. I grew up never expecting to go to college, and I got kind of tricked into going to college via affirmative action. So I was at the University of Washington in Seattle. I wanted to be a filmmaker. And I had never had a Black teacher. I integrated schools for 10 of 12 years of my public school education. I had never had a Black teacher, and I was really excited to have a Black teacher. It was a woman, a professor in an African-American literature course. And so this is a little scene from there and what happened the first day.
Go ahead. Why you keep going in and out?
Oh. No. Yeah, I ended up in college. I wanted to be a filmmaker, write films. And this is my first Black teacher of any kind in an Afro-American literature course at the University of Washington in 1973. Speaking of Black, I was thrilled to be taking my first Afro-American literature course with Professor M. I'd never had a Black teacher before. She was slender, her beauty softening with age, her straightened hair in a short bob framing her large expressive eyes. I had never heard of Zora Neale Hurston, the author of the first book assigned in Professor M's course. From page 1, their eyes were watching God grab me by the heart and wouldn't let go. Little did I know what the professor had in mind. The second week of class, she stood in front of me. I looked up, smiling expectantly. This, she announced loudly, pointing a manicured nail at my head, is what we call blow hair. She looked around the room, then back at me. Do you know what that means? I shook my head, cheeks burning. Well, she said, turning to the class triumphantly, it means hair that moves in the wind and conveys a certain way of being. I bit back the curses that rose in my throat and resisted the urge to ask the professor why she straightened her hair instead of sporting a black is beautiful afro. Only the intoxicating brilliance of Zora Neale Hurston's writing kept me from dropping that class. I was too in love with the enticing tale of Janie to deprive myself of that magnificent book. But I couldn't sleep until I shared my thoughts with Professor M for the way she had singled me out. I wrote her a letter, pouring my anger onto the typewriter keys. I described the sadistic white woman teacher I had in 4th and 5th grades who humiliated me by sitting me in front of the classroom to cut my hair while she ridiculed its texture. I told the tale of the neighborhood girls who'd driven me to cut off all my hair with the predictions that it would make me stuck up. I detailed the time my mother's youngest sister, my aunt, had forced a haircut on me because she didn't like the way it looked. I broke down my high school bully's obsession and fiery attack. I explained how all my life I'd heard about good hair and bad hair, but that the professor's attempt to single me out as an example of blow hair didn't make any sense. I concluded by saying that if she was expressed where I was coming from, maybe then she wouldn't ridicule any more of her students. So that's part of Swirl Girl.
All right. Thank you so much. You have anything else you would like to add before we close?
Yes, I would like to add that readers are the reason we write. And we always love to engage with you and to hear from you about what we've written and get your feedback and your input. And that I told my story in this memoir with the hope of inspiring and encouraging other people to tell our stories, however you tell them. It doesn't have to be in writing. It doesn't have to be in a book. This is my sermon. Get your story down. Control your story so that nobody else can write it and nobody else can represent your truth. And you can find Swirl Girl at, I'll put it in the comments, again, TaRessaStovall.com. And I look forward to hearing from all of you who think you might want to read this book. It's very spicy and it's very raw, okay? Because it's a level of truth that really hasn't been shared about mixed race identity in the US anywhere ever before, I promise you. So I want to thank you, Queenie, for everything you do for readers and for writers. And I want to just thank everybody for your time and attention and your support throughout the years.
All right. Thank you so much. Again, this is Queenie Clem with Queenie's Book Talk and Reviews. Happy reading. Bye, y'all.